Hello, everybody. We see a lot of people still joining us. We're going to give it 2 minutes, and then we will get started with our freight visibility webinar. So just 2 minutes. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for welcome, everybody, and thank you for participating in today's Freight Visibility webinar, No Tech, High Tech, and everything in between. So my name is Joe Langer. I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. Today, the webinar will last about 60 minutes. We have muted everyone's microphone so that we could have a good experience for everybody, but there's an opportunity for everyone to ask questions using the question and answer box at the bottom of the screen. You will see that, your questions, we will go through those, and we'll have time at the end to answer the questions. So after today's webinar, we'll actually send you this presentation, giving you the benchmarking information along with a next steps guide, so it'll help you through on your visibility journey. So as speakers today, we have Craig Paulson, who leads our commercial development for Intermodal. Craig?
Hi. Hey, folks. Hope everything is okay. Thanks for spending the time with us today. We know how busy you are with this very disruptive marketplace. We appreciate you spending time. We hope to learn from each other along the way. So welcome.
Thank you, Craig. And we also have Rodney Cromwell. And so Rodney leads our commercial development area for our logistics division. Rodney?
Hey, everybody.
So again, my name is Joe Langer, and I'll be the moderator today. So the objective of today's webinar is really so that you can gain some insights into how transportation peers are solving their visibility needs. We'll share the results of the benchmarking survey that you all took during the registration process, and it should give you some ideas to validate your approach as it compares to others. We'll discuss a variety of options, and we'll even share some of the success stories that people submitted during the registration. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rodney Cromwell, and Rodney's going to start the discussion talking about the survey results. So, Rodney?
Yeah, great to be with you, Joe and Craig. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Before we get into the survey results, I just wanted to quickly share a couple of thoughts on the topic of freight visibility and maybe give you some of my perspective on how visibility is advancing within the transportation industry. So as Joe mentioned, I have accountability for our commercial efforts within our logistics businesses, and within logistics, we manage just over 34,000 qualified carriers, as well as $2 billion in freight management. So we have a lot of carriers and a lot of shippers to manage and track freight for, and so I've had the unique ability or perspective, I guess, to see the evolution of visibility technology and the expectations that we're seeing from both the shipper and a carrier perspective. And, as I think about, where we're at in freight visibility, the evolution of freight visibility, clearly the technology continues to evolve rapidly. And in our own experience, technology that was cutting edge maybe a year or two ago is now obsolete. We've adopted other technologies. So we're going to continue to see this evolution. It's going to continue to move faster. And so I think a number of you have probably experienced something similar. And I think today's going to be a great opportunity for us to have some good two-way dialogue as we move forward in this journey together. So let's jump in and look at the first question here, the first survey results that we sent out. So the question was, what are your objectives for improved freight visibility? Something that jumps out to me right away, Craig, is the improved productivity of resources. 2020 has certainly been the year for disruption, and I think everyone's looking for ways to find increased productivity. Visibility certainly helps in that space, so really no surprise that this is front of mind for the respondents of the survey here.
I was talking to a customer the other day. Hey, Rodney, I was talking to a customer the other day, and they were talking about productivity, and the concern was that from a manufacturing standpoint, their product was flying off the shelves, but based on the disruptions that are happening with COVID-19 and some of the civil disruptions as well, they were experiencing up to 20% call-offs of their manufacturing facilities, and they had to consistently move product around and make decisions on where to bring product on a day-in, day-out basis, and this visibility helps them be that responsive.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, what also caught my eye here is towards the bottom we see, somewhat of a lower response in improve or expand automation. I'm thinking back, Joe, we had our last customer event down in Orlando where we were all able to be together in a room. And, we heard probably a very different sentiment from shippers around, where they were thinking about automation, the amount of, time they were spending with their C-suite, talking about, how they were looking to automate within their supply chain and how visibility was a critical piece of that. And so, we might be seeing a little bit of change in sentiment, maybe driven by COVID-19. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that progresses, the back half of 2020. And as we get into 2021, where does visibility and additional automation initiatives fit within budgeting? So just kind of an interesting call out there. Another response that caught my eye here was better inform impacted groups. Craig, this has been pretty consistent feedback that we've heard for a number of years around, I'm in transportation. Our team is constantly being asked for updates and to provide data to multiple stakeholders within the organization, multiple groups. And I can think of the number of times that transportation is being asked from their customer service to, provide customer updates and different inquiries. So obviously improved visibility is a great advancement, from the time-consuming and frustrating back and forth that existed, in this process just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, early on when we were making the investment into technology, we were hearing oftentimes from customers saying, hey, why do I have to hear from my consignee that you were late? You need to tell me so I can tell my consignee that you're going to be late if that's going to be the case, so I can make decisions as to where I can redeploy if necessary. So that really pushed many carriers like ourselves to reinvest and invest in technology that would allow for more real-time visibility.
Yeah. One more here, Craig, that is noticeable is about half the respondents selected consolidate visibility into one platform. And I would tell you within the brokerage businesses, within logistics, we definitely hear shippers asking or pushing for more integrated purchasing and tracking experiences. And so having visibility within their current TMS or portals has certainly improved overall customer experience, user experiences. So, something I think we'll see, probably emerge through a couple of these slides is just, how folks are thinking about integrated solutions. What does that look like, and how do they go about, setting up the right solutions for success? So, Craig, I know we got a couple other responses as well. What else did we hear from the respondents?
Sure. So there's a few other objectives that were mentioned from the group. And again, as you think about this webinar, it's really your experiences, experiences from all of you that provided the context for this webinar. So a few things that were consistent: reducing freight costs. Obviously, we all have had some budget hits related to COVID-19 that we're trying to make up for. So it's high intensity on cost for certain. The other one, improved near real-time security. So you think about that, it's interesting that shippers are looking for an added level of security and risk mitigation. And as we go through the survey today, you'll hear more and more of that as far as best practices, and even the Q&A, I think some of that may come out as well. In today's environment, we're seeing more things like looting and pilfering of boxes and freight security, where there are some pockets where people have more time on their hands, and it's something that we have to be more aware of. and it's something that you want to ensure that your carriers invest in, and having that visibility all the way through the supply chain will help with that.
Yeah, Craig, I would say that risk monitoring and security through visibility, that's been more, in my belief, more of a recent evolution. That's something that we've heard more from over the last few months than we heard previously. So it's interesting. I talked about the evolution of the technology, but also the evolution of kind of what the expectation is from shipper to consignee and all the way through the supply chain. So interesting.
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing in RFPs are asking for our percent of claims-free shipments, and that's something that, to your point, really didn't come up in previous RFPs. Competitive and quick rate quotes. It's not just being competitive and making sure you're in the ditch lines, but respond in a real-time fashion with technology. We'll hit on that. Folks want to talk a bit more about what else is happening from a trend and direction standpoint that people are seeing. There was a role play question that I received just talking about the fact that this particular customer is a logistics manager over 7 different companies, and they are in manufacturing. And the products that they ship out are customer routed based on consumer demand. What they're looking for is to learn more about the future challenges our business may face. So right now, if you think about the here and now, we're all struggling just to get through today's hot button. But what's going to happen 3 months down the road or 6 months down the road that we could potentially learn from each other on, and what should we be looking for as far as a solution to advance things today and make sure we're proactive in that respect. All right, so one of the things that we didn't talk about was number one there. Rodney, you didn't highlight the top response to the survey, which was, visibility is going to improve service.
I was waiting for you to call me out on that. I was wondering if you were going to pick up that I didn't mention that one.
Yeah, so it's a consistent misunderstanding. We call it a bit of a myth that, what drives service is really visibility. And, oh my gosh, over the last couple of years with this increased visibility, my service has improved. Well, it really isn't the visibility. In fact, many carriers have had this technology for decades, including Schneider. So what drives your on-time service more frequently is really capacity demand. So you think about some of the tools that are out there related to Morgan Stanley or FreightWaves, and it shows you what's happening in the capacity demand space. That's what drives service, on-time service performance. What visibility does help you do, though, is take control and see the freight all the way through your supply chain, and then reschedule, maybe redeploy from other locations to close those gaps that may be at risk. It also, again, allows you to inform groups internally and externally that a delay is happening. So again, you don't have to be hearing it from your consignee. You tell the consignee that, hey, something is happening that's driving concerns. Productivity. Go ahead, please.
To add on there, I think a lot of times, it's the perception versus the performance. Sometimes folks might perceive that it's improving because they're better informed, they're better aware. Sure. It's definitely to the point of, what is the scorecard saying versus kind of what does everybody believe is happening, which, can be tough to kind of differentiate sometimes.
You bet. And the last one is, it does hit, right to the bottom line. It's fees, late fees, penalties. And some of those penalties that are customer driven, they have items like, if you let me know within or outside of 24 hours that you're going to be delayed, you're not going to be fined. Those are things that carriers can help with, and the visibility can help with. Things will happen in the supply chain. You want to try to reduce that as much as you can, but providing that visibility and that pre-notification is significantly important. So what type of visibility options do you think we're going to stop doing, keep doing, we're going to add? This is a very interesting slide. One of the things that jump out at me is around just the whole phone piece. And even though phone is an old piece of technology, you still got 60% of the people using phone to track and trace freight. Although you do have 18% of the people looking to run away from that as well. Email is still a popular choice. There are some things on the email space related to automation that carriers have as well that can create auto responses to help drive some efficiency. That's something that's being advanced. Portal is on the rise. We're going to spend, that's good because we're going to spend quite a bit of time on Portal in upcoming slides and what that does and what it doesn't do. EDI has been around forever, still trending pretty high, still something that people are using. Folks are looking at adding an API or an application program interface as well. How does that compare and contrast to EDI? What do you get out of an API? Is it lower cost? Is it higher cost? Is it more real time? And so on. And then the last one, which we're going to dive into quite a bit because there's a big gap as far as needing information. 44% of the folks want more information on third-party visibility aggregators. What are they and what aren't they? And what can they do? And how much satisfaction do people have that are using these aggregators, which we're going to get into right now.
Greg, I noticed 2% are going to add email. I thought that was interesting. So I'm not sure what they were doing before, but we're stepping into some new territory with email there, which is an interesting kind of takeaway.
So we're getting away from postal mail then, Rodney.
It's true.
All right, so how satisfied are people with the third-party aggregator? Let's jump to the next slide. I would say the reviews are mixed at best. So this is a pretty busy slide, but you'll see on the far right, there's a bunch of folks that it's not required or they believe it's not available. So, but even the folks that are using it, the reviews are mixed. Like I said, the highest scores are around ET accuracy, arrival depart information, the user experience, and reporting. So people are relatively satisfied. But even at that, it's capped out at about a 1/3 satisfaction level. So, Rodney, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think people are still trying to figure it out. I mean, I think everybody's trying to get a better understanding of what the tool is, how to best use it. I think we're going to see that a couple of times through the survey results, but it's definitely interesting to see kind of the mixed responses, as you mentioned, across a number of these categories.
And they're all using the similar tool. In fact, our results mentioned 1 or 2 in particular. So the tool is being used by many different customers, but different applications or for different purposes.
Right. So, Craig, you talked a lot about the we got some interesting responses. You talked a lot about the different options. Let's talk about the satisfaction. One thing that jumps out to me on this slide is the overall satisfaction around, we talked about phone and email. I mean, we're looking at, 76% are satisfied or very satisfied with email communication. It's a bit surprising. I think, I talked about automation earlier and the push in automation. It seems like, maybe, and again, I don't know how much of this is COVID related or just trying to get, kind of back to normal, but, and that's a pretty high response when you think about that type of email communication back and forth. So again, where does that play in terms of overall initiatives, strategic focus to automate and improve overall efficiency? The other one that jumps out to me here is 70% not using API. With all the different use cases with API, what you're seeing from a quote book track, the ability to get instantaneous information, how dynamic it can be. I would have assumed that would have been a lot higher. So it's kind of an interesting, sort of understanding of where people might be.
I think folks really wonder from a cost perspective how it compares to EDI, right? And it is newer technology, and it's more of just uncovering what an API can and can't do, most likely.
Yeah. So, Craig, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't kind of cover the next slide, which gets into what we're doing. We made some news last week with the launch of Schneider Freight Power. Really this Freight Power marketplace, it's providing shippers with a new way to work with us. On the previous slide, we talked about portals and API and some of the different technologies. I think, shippers having the ability to access capacity and the technology they need to deliver more. It's really, this intersection of capacity and technology and how we're trying to provide that. So I think, everyone on today, stay tuned. There's more information to come, but, we're definitely hearing where folks are seeing satisfaction in terms of how they're getting access to data, how they're getting that visibility reporting, and ultimately those connection points. So a lot more to come there, but just something I wanted to highlight to the group.
Hey, Rodney, a bit of a tease here, too, as to what's to come. This will be an opportunity for our customers to link. We're going to really provide a connectivity to other carriers, even outside of Schneider, with this tool down the road, correct?
Yeah, more to come. There's a lot more advancements happening here. Certainly, we've learned a lot, in terms of platforms and different ways to connect and communicate. And I think, you've seen probably the most in terms of portals. What else would you see?
Yeah, let's jump to portals and take a look at what's out there, if we could. So I'll provide our perspective on carrier portals, and what you see is Schneider's portal, which I think is a pretty cool and up-to-date model of what us and other carriers are trying to do. And I will tell you that carriers are using and creating portals to really provide an exceptional experience for their customers as well. This has become a differentiator from carrier A to carrier B, and that's how we look at it. So I believe it's a great tool for quick self-service. If you have a significant amount of your freight moving on 2 or 3 carriers, I would use those 2 or 3 carrier portals, and I would decide what carriers to use based on how dynamic those portals are. Looking at our example, you'll see that our portal includes alerts and load mapping. Each carrier has their own version. So shippers do need to go get access to each of the carrier portals they would like to use. One of the suggestions, again, is you probably want to use the 2 or 3 or 4 that have the majority of your freight to get the best bang for your buck.
So Craig, how you kind of laid it out there, I think is interesting. You're thinking of it as kind of an and strategy, not so much of an or, which I think may have been coming across in the survey results when we looked at the aggregators in aggregate. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, this really is the entree, and the appetizer and the dessert for the other 20% is probably, maybe it's EDI, maybe it's email, but the majority is tracked and traced through a portal. Correct. All right, a question we get often is around connectivity using an API. And people are looking for a lower cost alternative to EDI. We know that APIs provide this by connecting directly to the carrier. But today, EDI, it's a national standard. It's been around forever. With an API, each carrier defines their own format, and consequently, there's no universal standard, so there's some inconsistency there. API interactions are generally faster than EDI because of the direct connectivity, but there's a cost to set that technology up. We believe it's similar to EDI. Most APIs are used for shipment status or for spot quoting. Rodney, add some color to this as well, if you would.
Well, the thing that I heard this a few years ago, and it stuck with me. And I think, to your point, EDI and API are very effective. They're different in terms of what the use cases are. But I heard this a few years ago, and the quote was, "EDI is the fax machine to API being Twitter." And I think what it really connected for me is just API being faster, more dynamic. It has more flexibility to deliver a much superior communication between systems. And I think as we have seen the ongoing evolution of freight visibility, all of the demands and the expectations of shippers and carriers to have that instantaneous communication and response, API is definitely a stronger output for that expectation. So it's interesting to think of all of the use cases that we continue to find for API communication between systems.
Sure. All right, let's dive into this next slide if we could. It's pretty busy. It makes your eyes bleed a little bit, so we'll try to simplify it as best we can. You look at the top left, you see that there's a single carrier solution, and you're comparing and contrasting to an automated or multi-carrier solution as well. As we stated, basically you may need to go to a different platform or app for each carrier when you're using their particular portal. That's correct, right, Rodney? That's really one of the fallbacks.
Yeah, I think so, Craig. I mean, there's going to be pros and cons to each of these, but I think a good example of this would be aggregators are just estimating ETAs, while the single carrier direct method, you're going to get real-time ETA from the carrier. There's more kind of an estimation versus actual data. So I think that's an important thing, for shippers to keep in mind as they think about, whether this is, a single source solution, a multi-source solution. I think those are all considerations that have to be made.
So that third-party aggregator is a one-stop shop. You get connectivity and visibility to all your freight with all your carriers, but it's dependent on a carrier providing information to the aggregator, and it may be an estimate versus an actual, right? So again, it's a compare and contrast. It's really what matters the most to you. And what does your bandwidth look like related to your infrastructure? What does the carrier base look like that you utilize? If it's only a couple carriers, a portal might be a perfect visibility tool, complement it with email, for example. So it is very specific and personalized based on the customer, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the third-party aggregator it's going to be that one-stop shop, but it does come at a different cost, and there's obviously other factors that go into how successful the setup and implementation execution are going to be. So, and I think all of those are considerations that need to be made. Obviously, you're factoring in the cost, you're factoring in, what application, how it makes sense within your business, or there things that fit, things that don't. So, yeah, I mean, I think those are all considerations that need to be made.
All right, let's jump to a couple quotes that we saw.
Yeah, so, the one that jumps out to me here, Craig, is the last one, saying it's a challenge to get carriers to comply. I think that's something that we've heard from a number of our customers in terms of compliance and effectiveness in this space. As you think about it, what's your perspective?
Yeah, it really is, from a consistency standpoint, you have carriers that do not want to provide incremental information to an aggregator because it really is additional work. Most carriers have their own platforms where they're putting in their details, they're putting in their notes, they're working on load save, and you have to replicate that for an aggregator. And it can be increased work, but I will tell you that if the customer requires it, carriers will figure out a way to do it, and that could be done with some automation and interface that the carriers create that ties to the aggregator, for example.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective. The other thing, Craig, I would mention is that 90% of the carriers in the United States are small carriers. They're less than 10 trucks.
Right.
So the technology is not always easily configurable. That definitely proves to be problematic for customers with a large number of carriers that support their supply chain. And I could just tell you, speaking from experience, a tremendous amount of effort and investment goes into getting carriers implemented. Even within our brokerage business, we have, to ensure we have the right technology. We have teams that are focused on, ensuring adoption, implementation. And so, I think it's important for shippers to keep that in mind as they think about, their current carrier base and what the right solution is going to look like. Again, it could be a combination of tools, not just that one-stop shop.
For sure. A couple of comments I want to make related to these quotes. One is the top left, we've used a visibility aggregator for about 2 years. The first year was less than ideal. Spent a lot of time chasing carriers. It is something that evolves. It's like any new tool. You can't implement it and just give up because there is a bit of, I would call it carrier training that goes to this and some carrier advocacy that goes to this as well. So there is an investment that the customer will make. It's definitely not a plug and play, right, Rodney?
Yeah, I love that quote, and at the bottom it says, we're pushing the limits of the platform to really get a better understanding of where we're advancing. I think that's so true. I mean, trying to understand what the platform can do. Hopefully you've done some vetting to understand fully all of the functionality and capabilities, but I think you certainly definitely want to push, and the technology is going to continue to advance. So understanding what's out there and what's on the horizon is really important.
For sure. And again, even the top right, it talks again about the portals. And as I said earlier, carrier portals are advancing and they're getting more real time and providing additional features. The mapping feature is something a lot of people want. They want to see, I want to look at all my freight, my network on one screen. So carriers continue to invest in their portals, and we're seeing that there are many customers that, especially customers that are going down to more of the chosen few providers from a carrier perspective that are investing in another portal ad from a carrier or two.
The other thing I would mention here, it's not called out in a quote, but we've heard it a lot from shippers, is around, hey, the data I'm getting isn't always correct, or there's things that are showing up as kind of false negatives within the data. I think it's really important to understand, what are you looking to achieve with a visibility scorecard? Is it matching, how you want to measure your carriers? What are your carriers going to need to do to be successful? So yes, there's the technical component of making sure that they're set up and that they're going to be compliant, but it's also, how do you want to scorecard them? Because you might have different folks within your organization that are looking for different things, and just because it's a one-stop shop doesn't always mean that it's going to provide that. So I just think it really speaks to having a level of conversation and a vetting process on the front end that ensures that you're going to get the best product for everyone involved in your organization.
And truly, all products that customers ship aren't equal. You have some freight that's just-in-time line shutdown freight, for example, that may require a different amount of oversight and visibility to just perhaps replenishment. So, again, I see this as an and versus an or in all cases.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, we see that with a lot of customers that buy across our portfolio. They might have a need for our assets, dense, consistent freight, drop trailers, but on the brokerage side, they might have, it's hard to forecast, low density freight, so the requirements are different, and the visibility expectations might be different with that as well. And so I think it's taking all of that in a measured response back to who your providers are going to be and making sure you're setting yourself up for success.
You bet.
All right. Well, thank you, Craig. Thank you, Rodney. There's a lot of options as we think about visibility. But before we go too much further, there has been some questions coming in, so I'll switch to that and ask some questions. So the first one that I have is, it says, I want to know if the industry could ever go to free-flowing data from carriers to shippers without the need to go through an aggregator who can sometimes cleanse or manipulate the data. So will there be kind of free-flowing data sometime in the future?
Well, I tell you, one of the things I think about first is the bill of lading. And we were working to standardize the bill of lading I've been at Schneider 33 years, and it's been, every day, and we still don't have a standardized bill of lading. So I wish I was more optimistic. Rodney, what color would you add?
Well, I would just say on the third-party side, I mean, and we talked a lot about APIs today. We're not selling API, but I mean, we definitely have a lot of connections with different platforms through API, and you are seeing, more direct carrier to shipper communication, system to system communication, where the flow of information and data is a lot more effective. I think you'll continue to see advancements there. I don't know that all of the buying experience is going to be automated in that way, but we're definitely seeing a lot of different use cases, and I think the technology is certainly supporting it in a way that's different than what we had, just a few years ago.
Okay, all right, good. You mentioned a lot about freight visibility aggregators, so one of the questions that came through is, which freight visibility aggregator would you recommend?
That's a good question.
Like well, 7 to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, we work with a number of them. As I mentioned in the logistics business, we are obviously managing a lot of the carrier and customer relationships, and so we work with a number of aggregators to provide the best experience for our shippers. But I would what I would say, Joe, is we don't have a horse in the race. We really believe that it's shippers. They need to understand what each aggregator is offering. They need to understand, what the capability, what the technology is, the functionality, the user experience is critically important. I think they all have, somewhat different user experiences. And so, I would just, provide the guidance of take the time to understand all of the options that are out there, understand what your carrier's positions are, what they're offering with technology, and certainly spend the time internally with various stakeholders within your organization to understand what exactly are they trying to get after before you make that selection, because you are going to pay for it, and you want to make sure that it's set up for success and that it's going to help you advance in this area, not put you on a 1 or 2 year path where you're going to have challenges to improve. So that would kind of be my answer by not answering the question directly.
All right, Rodney, let me take a swing at it. Right before we went on lockdown here in early March, I visited a customer. We were talking about their switch to a different aggregator, and they were talking about the success that they were having from the previous aggregator to their new aggregator. And this is somebody who's been in the space for about 5 years. And as they were comparing and contrasting, they were talking about the success. And as I was digging in as to what made this one more successful, what really drove the success was the requirements that they put on the carrier to update the tool. And it wasn't necessarily the tool, it was the interface that they required between the carrier and their new aggregator that they didn't require in the past. So it has a lot to do with what you can get the carrier to provide as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we talked about it being a one-stop shop, and I think that's very true. And I think there's, obviously a lot of integration happening. But again, it's understanding what all of the requirements are, what the expectations are. If you have a large supply chain and you've got a lot of carriers that are supporting your supply chain, you can anticipate that you're going to have a number of carriers that are not compliant. And so it's understanding what are the aggregators providing in that space. What is the advanced tech that they're offering? How are they going to work through those compliance? We see a lot of customers that have that experience, Craig, where they're on one option, it doesn't work. They're kind of on the second evolution. I think,
right.
The best practice is just ensure that you've fully vetted that out before you make that investment.
You bet.
And get references and ask people what their experience is. You saw some of that come through in the comments. That people...
Yeah, we have a lot of people that ask for references, and again, because we are purchasing transportation on our logistics side, we certainly love to have those conversations.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, so I have one other one, which is, can Schneider help with visibility? How can Schneider help? I'm sorry, how can Schneider help with visibility?
Sure, I think there's a couple things. Let me take it from the asset side, and then Rodney, you can close it out on the non-asset side. So we've taken great pains, and we've been a trucking company for 85 odd years, but we've been investing heavily in technology for several decades, related specifically to trailing equipment and technology on the tractors as well. So we know where the trailing equipment is, the doors are open, how long it's been sitting. And we've known this information for many, many decades, like I said. So this is something we've invested time in, energy and capital into, in addition to the setup of our capacity. So asset-based, in most cases, it's our drivers, our tractors, our trailing equipment, our chassis. Having that ownership, that control of the resources is really important. If you're counting on a third-party provider, for example, they have to go through multiple entry points and multiple folks to find out exactly where your product might be. An asset-based provider like Schneider, again, you should get your answer because it's all under one roof and under one platform.
Yeah, I think in addition to the investments that Craig mentioned, it's that seamless experience. It's providing, the tracking, the visibility, at your fingertips, and making sure that you have it instantaneously. It's the connections that we've talked a lot about today. But then I also think spending time with customers to understand what are the best fits, what are we doing that would help within your process, what are some of those referrals that we just talked about. So I think it's spending time with your core carriers, like Schneider, to sit down and say, okay, well, how could I build this out? What does the visibility journey look like, and how do we, assist in that process? So I think it's a good, opportunity for us to go through with each and every customer.
You think about how we answer that, Rodney. It's really about finding a carrier with multimodal solutions that has a solution for your need, whether it's expedited, intermodal, dedicated, brokerage, whatever it might be, and finding somebody that has that breadth of portfolio. to make sure that you're getting the right solution, not just the solution that they actually have, right?
Yeah, I think that, we talked about freight power, right? It's the access to capacity, and it's that intersection of, ability to scale, to provide access to our trailers, but also the technology, the platforms, and we're really excited about a lot more of the stuff that will be coming in that space.
Very good. Well, so let's just move on to what we see for next steps. So we talked about several of these as we went through the discussion today. So we kind of categorize it into 4 different areas. The first one is really making sure you establish what your visibility objectives are. If it's about making sure that you're using your resources right, make that your priority as you go through and evaluate the best option for you. Do a stakeholder analysis. So make sure you understand all of the people that are involved and their needs for visibility, because their roles may require different information. So as you go through and create your solution or approach your solution, you're going to want to make sure that everybody is covered from a visibility standpoint. They're getting what they need. We'll send this data out, so use this data as benchmarking to validate your own approach. So you're seeing a lot of variety in the industry. There's definitely some preferences when in the satisfaction you saw people moving away from phone, but you did also see people interested in new ways to get information, whether it's the API or whether it's Aggregator. And the last is really, if you have the ability to implement a new technology solution, consider that. Make sure you have the ability to spend cost on some technology changes. There are some of these visibility options that will require a technology investment. Don't shy away from that. Sometimes your technology group actually may have a sincere interest in changing away from some traditional ways into something new that's more reliable or provides them at a lower cost. So, so by all means, at least consider that as an option as you go forward. So we have one more thing we'd like you to do before we end. We have a short survey that we're going to ask everyone to talk about some ideas for future webinars. But Rodney, Craig, any additional insights, any additional information you'd like to share?
The one thing I'll say is, as you have questions, anything that comes up at all, I was looking at the attendee list, and many of you I've worked with in the past. Feel free to reach out to myself or Joe or Rodney, and it doesn't have to be a Schneider-specific question. Anything supply chain related, we'd love to help. Right now, as you might expect, none of us are traveling too much, so we're a captive resource to assist.
Yeah, Joe, I would just add that, these Shipper Insight events have provided us a fantastic opportunity to share some of our perspective, and you get to hear from us and kind of what we're thinking, but more importantly, we get to hear from you, and we get to hear across multiple industries around what's working, what's not working, what plans folks have to address visibility or other topics in the future. So I can assure you that our tech team, our commercial teams, they're taking a lot of this feedback, they're listening to it, and it's influencing the decisions that we make going forward to best serve our customer base. So really appreciate everyone that takes the time to participate and hear some of our thoughts.
We are conducting webinars to get some content out to everybody. We hope to see people again in the future, but having these now is really still making the connection and providing good information to people. So, all right. So, so with that, I think the survey is still available. But once again, I want to make sure that thank you to everybody that's participated today. We look forward to having you participate in a future webinar, and just let Schneider know how we can help as you venture on your visibility journey. So for everyone, take care and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.